Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final class of the Financial Foundation for Success class series. Last class, we talked all about credit. If you haven't watched it yet, go ahead. There is a link in the description box below. Today, we're going to be talking about protecting your financial future.
Please make sure that after watching today's video, you click on the link in the description box below. There will be a few short questions to confirm that you watched today's video. So grab your document shredder, some shorts, and your favorite fan because we're about ready to turn up the heat on financial security right now.
So in today's class, what we'll be talking about is identity theft, ways to protect yourself, financial scams, and fringe services.
So what is identity theft? It is when someone is pretending to be someone they're not. Kind of like this little dog here pretending to be an old woman, but it's actually a dog. This is like my favorite picture of the entire series. Identity theft is when someone uses your personal information to open lines of new credit, take over existing accounts, or even do things like apply for your tax refund, essentially pretending to be you.
Information that can be used to steal your identity are things like your social security number, your name, address, date of birth, your mother's maiden name, passwords, and PINs. A lot of this information can be gained very easily, especially with the increased use of social media.
So how does someone actually steal your identity? One of the classics, of course, is dumpster diving. People will go through other people's recycling bins or trash looking for sensitive documents. We even had a participant once who had her entire recycling bin stolen. They just took the whole thing. Instead of going through it, they just took it. Of course, we have to be careful with our wallets and purses. Make sure that you're leaving those things. If you're leaving those things in the car, make sure that they're out of sight so as to not attract would-be thieves. The internet can also be a dangerous place if you're not careful with where you enter your information and the websites which you visit. For example, there are websites out there that pretend to be legitimate companies or government agencies. They look exactly like the real deal. They're super tricky. Same logo, same web page, but fraudulent. We'll talk more about this one a little bit later. Thieves will sometimes steal your mail. It is one of the quickest and easiest ways to steal someone's sensitive documents. All they have to do is drive up, roll down their window, and take what is there, then they drive away. One last way we'll mention here on this slide for people to steal someone else's identity is complete a change of address card. It is easy to do and requires minimum verification. I think you can even do it online these days. The thief redirects your mail to a different address where they can collect it, and you may not even notice it's happening for a few days.
That's right. So what are some ways that we can protect ourselves? First and foremost, monitor your credit report. This is so important because you can catch someone opening lines of credit in your name sooner and see other discrepancies that may be there. Do not give out personal information unless you initiated contact. And this is through any means of communication, whether it's a phone call, an email, a text message. Unless you were the one that initiated contact, do not give out your personal information. Make sure that you're protecting your debit card and credit cards. This could mean ensuring that they're on you at all times, or just not even taking the credit or debit cards that you don't need that day and leaving them in a safe place at home. Always know where your wallet or purse is. So many of us carry all of our information in our wallet and purse. And so if that's stolen, that's essentially all of your information in one spot. And then make sure that you're checking your mail often. Like Tyler mentioned, a very easy way for people to gain information about you is stealing mail. So make sure that your mail is either in a locked box, or if you don't have that ability, to check it every single day.
You can also use a shredder. They are maybe $30 on Amazon or Walmart, and they destroy your sensitive documents in seconds. You can make complex passwords and PINs. We always say in class, please don't be the person that uses the word password as their password. Also, try to stay away from easy to guess things such as your birthday, anniversary, your pet's name, favorite sports team, etc. All those easily identifiable things that someone can find on your Facebook page, try to avoid using them as your passwords. Notify your banks and companies you do business with when you change addresses. This way, your mail will always be sent to the correct address. Use antivirus software on your computer, and you can even find a reputable one for free with a little bit of research. Lastly, make sure you research websites that you have not yet been on. If you are about to make a purchase on an unfamiliar site, go to Google and search for reviews. If there are no reviews, then that should be a red flag. If you're entering your credit card info into a site, make sure it is a site that can be trusted with that information.
Great. So before we move any further, because this is such an important piece of protecting your identity, let's think about those tips and techniques that we just talked about. And what is an inexpensive item you can purchase at most home or office supply stores to protect your identity? So think over what we had just talked about. What do you think would be an inexpensive item that you can easily pick up at a store to protect your identity?
If you answered paper shredder, you are correct. Like I said, head over to your local Walmart or your local Amazon and find yourself one of those guys for $30, and you will have years of shredding satisfaction at your disposal.
That's right. It could be pretty fun too, a little bit of a stress reliever.
100%.
Unfortunately, if you do think your identity has been stolen, there are some steps you can take. Contact your financial institutions and creditors, any bank, credit union, credit card company, loan company, anyone that you are doing business with. Make sure that you call them and let them know what has happened. Contact the 3 major credit bureaus. So contact the credit bureaus, let them know that you think your identity has been stolen. You will want to file a police report. That way you will have official documentation that you reported the crime. Keep in mind that often the local police will not have the resources to track down the criminal, but having that police report will give you the documentation to provide to your financial institutions and creditors to prove your identity was stolen and not be liable for any charges that had occurred. Make sure that you keep a detailed record of your contacts, the day you spoke to them, a note of what you spoke about, what company it was, the name of the representative. As much detail as you can put in there, again, will just help you with your case. And then also call the FTC's identity theft hotline at the number on the screen, or visit their website at www.ftc.gov/ID theft.
Okay, we are going to put an identity theft self-checklist up on the screen. Please grab a piece of paper and a pen to jot down your score as we go through each one, and we'll be able to give a short assessment at the end and should be able to help you identify how good you are with protecting your identity.
That's right. So we have different behaviors listed here. And for each behavior, think about if you always do this, if you only do it sometimes, or if you never do it. If you always do this behavior, give yourself 2 points. If it's just sometimes, give yourself 1 point. And if you never do this, it'll be 0 points. And so you'll give yourself the appropriate points for each scenario. So first and foremost, cover or block the point of sale or ATM keypad when I enter my PIN. So if you're at the grocery store and you're entering your PIN, or if you're at the ATM machine and entering your PIN, do you cover it? Do you block it so that other people cannot see it and record it? So for me, I'll admit I only sometimes do it. Sometimes I'm in a rush, or where it's located, I don't always think that it, is important to do that. So I'll give myself a 1 for this, but definitely it's something that we should always be doing. But again, it's important to be honest with yourself. That way you'll know the areas that you can improve on.
Yeah.
What about you, Tyler?
Oh, I never do this.
Oh, Tyler. Bad example.
I cover with my body. I'm like 6'3". No one's looking over my shoulder.
That's true. I am not 6'3", so I definitely have to block.
Yeah, you got to put your hands up there for sure.
Yes.
How about this next one here? Carry only the identification, checks, credit cards, or debit cards you really need. Do you always do it? Do you sometimes do it? Or do you never do it? I always do this one. It helps that I don't have too many debit or credit cards to begin with. Just one.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
So, yeah, I'll give myself a 2 on this one.
Very good. So, yeah, think about, things like your social security card. Most of us, unless we're applying for a job or applying for some sort of benefit, we don't need to carry our social security card with us at all times. So think about that as well, and not just the credit cards and debit cards, because again, if your wallet or purse gets stolen, now that criminal has all of the information. All right. So the next one, do you use direct deposit for paychecks, tax refunds, anything that you're able to as far as income and checks are concerned? I definitely use direct deposit, not only because it's safer, but oftentimes it's faster, it's easier. So I always use direct deposit for paychecks, for my tax refunds, anything that I can. If you currently don't use direct deposit, check, at your financial institution and see what can be done in regards to getting it set up.
Okay. Do I shred documents with personal or financial information before disposing them or recycling them? Let me tell you what doesn't count. What doesn't count is tearing it into pieces with your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
My 3-year-old daughter can put together your finger torn document. She's great at puzzles, so I'm guessing a thief could do it as well. Make sure you get that shredder going.
Cross-cut paper shredder.
Cross-cut to make sure your documents are completely destroyed.
Very good. All right, the next one here. Use complex passwords with a mix of numbers, symbols, and letters instead of easy words. This is an important one. I know we have a lot of different accounts, different logins, and in order to remember, sometimes people take the easy way out, and unfortunately, that way leaves you open to identity theft. So make sure you're using complex passwords, mixtures of numbers, lowercase, uppercase, symbols, etc. That way you will be safe. I always do that. My passwords are pretty complicated. But again, I think that it's a little more important to just memorize them than to open yourself up to that risk.
Next, do I review financial statements and bills monthly to identify and correct errors? Myself, I do this sometimes. I'll give myself a 1 there. For example, I will always take a look at my bank statements, but maybe not my Mid-American statement. If thieves are stealing my electricity, that's okay. I've always wondered what those extension cords are hooked up to the side of my house.
All right. Next, we have, do I review my credit report annually and identify and correct any errors? So for this one, I always do that. It's something that you just need to do once a year. You know, it's advantageous to do it throughout the year, but at a minimum, even if you just do it once a year, to identify and correct those errors. So I feel like that's something that we can commit to doing. It's one time a year. So if you're not always checking and reviewing your credit report, so like we talked about in class 3, make sure that you're using that resource of getting your free annual credit report to make sure you're protecting yourself from identity theft.
Okay, how about this next one here? Do you use a secure mailbox for incoming and outgoing mail, or at the very minimum, check your mail daily? I do. I'm going to give myself a 2 for that one.
Okay, last one here. Do we avoid providing and sharing our personal information? So things like our social security number, even things like your telephone number or email address, that could get you on a list where criminals will try to email you or call you for scams or other types of identity theft related activities. So just thinking about your personal information, do you avoid providing and sharing it whenever possible? For me, definitely, I'm a pretty private person. So when I'm at a store even and they're asking, what's your phone number? Enter your phone number. I just say, no, thank you. I don't think that that's necessary. And for the most part, it's no big deal. So don't provide it just because someone's asking you. If you don't feel comfortable providing it, you definitely don't have to. All right, so if you have given yourself a score for all of these activities, go ahead and pause the video or take some time to total up each of your columns. So for me, in the always column, I have 14 points. In the sometimes column, I have 2 points. In the never column, I have 0 points. So that gives Tyler and I a grand total of 16 points. So go ahead and tally up your totals. Once you have your total, we'll take a look here at the scoring. If you scored 0 to 6, you are not taking many actions to minimize your risk of identity theft. Consider what you've learned today and consider how you can implement steps to protect your identity. If you scored a 7 to 13, you've developed some good practices to avoid identity theft. However, you do have some room for improvement. Consider what actions you need to take or apply more regularly to better protect your identity. And then if you scored a 14 to 18, you're doing a great job at minimizing your risk of identity theft. Continue to apply these actions regularly and determine what additional steps you can take to protect your identity.
Let's have a chat about financial scams. They are everywhere, right around the corner, waiting to get you. So let's make sure that we are prepared. Advanced fee schemes. This one is a classic. I feel like this one's been around for a while. For example, maybe someone just contacted you and told you that you won $100 on a game show that you never participated in, but you figure, hey, that sounds okay. I'll take that $100. But then they tell you, oh, but to cover the taxes for that, we have to have you pay $20 in advance. Never get your $100, but they keep your 20, and that is a scam. Or a very similar one, the prize that will cost you, maybe you won a big TV that someone just informed you of. They say, hey, Larissa, we are calling you because we have some exciting news.
Ooh.
You just won an 80-inch flat screen. Compliments of flat screens for you.
Wow. I feel honored.
But we're going to need $40 in order to ship it to you.
That sounds a little fishy.
Yeah, sounds a little suspicious.
If you can give me a 80-inch TV, why couldn't, which probably has a value of hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, it wouldn't include the $40 of shipping? Something just doesn't sound right there.
Yeah, something doesn't sound right. And Larissa brings up a good point. You got to watch for some of these like internal red flags that go off too, because some of them they're quite blatantly a scam. You can identify them pretty quick. However, occasionally we hear of some that are quite real, and to the unsuspecting eye, it would be easy to be fooled. And so you got to trust some of those red flags that go off, like Larissa just said. If there's something that just doesn't quite seem right, maybe follow that intuition and do a little bit more research. There's online auctions that can be financial scams. Places like eBay, typically pretty safe. However, there are a lot of other not as reputable auction sites that you might want to watch out for. Again, it's all about doing your research ahead of time. Search for reviews if you haven't used a service before that's online, and make sure that it is one that's reputable. There are fraud jobs. Some of you may have seen job listings, say on Craigslist before. Some of them are probably legitimate. Some of them are not. An example of this sort of scam would be finding a job online, applying for it, and part of the application is you putting down your social security number and sending it to this company, and then you never hear from them again because they just stole your personal information from you. There are money-making schemes. We like to talk about multi-level marketing companies here. It is a legal thing to either engage with, be a seller for, or buy from, but they're typically not in the best interest of the people lower in the organization. The people high in the organization get a lot of the money. You can do your research. There's quite a few examples. A lot of times, in order to buy in and become a consultant, you have to buy hundreds of dollars worth of product before you can start selling. And it is very hard to sell these types of products usually. So that's another thing to watch out for. There are bogus charities. It's a real shame that is something that we have to talk about. But some people, they'll set up what looks to be a charity website. They talk about the people that they're helping or whatever it might be. People will donate to it, and then the money actually never goes to that cause. And there are also scam schools. This is probably one of the worst ones in my opinion, because you get done with your degree program, and even though the school said that they were accredited and recognized, they are not. So you just spent all of your money and all of your time on a degree that isn't the value that you thought it was.
Now that Tyler's gone over some of these scams to watch out for, what are some things we can do to avoid them? First and foremost, do not worry about appearing rude. So many times people don't want to hang up the phone or close the door, walk away from, someone that is trying to convince them and scam them. So these people are criminals. They're trying to coerce you into giving out your information or giving them money under false pretenses. So definitely do not worry about appearing rude. Do not feel pressured to purchase. A lot of times they will say that you have a limited time to purchase, or that there's a special offer that will never ever happen again, things of that nature. Those are tactics to get you to purchase right away. Keep in mind that a legitimate company is going to be around next week, next month. And if they are a legitimate company, they will want your business, whether it's today or in the future. Investigate deals that seem too good to be true. If something seems too good to be true, it's usually because it is. If you have been looking at certain items and you kind of know their price point, and then you see a website or you get an email saying that you could purchase that item for way less than the typical price point is, that's a red flag. And it could mean that it's a scam. They're going to steal your credit card number. They're going to steal the amount that you paid for it, and you'll never get the item. Do not be fooled by appearances. Oftentimes, these scammers that call you or come to your door, they may speak very professionally, look very professional. That does not mean that that is the case, and you should still do your research and make sure you know exactly it is who you're dealing with before you exchange any information or credit card numbers. And then lastly, do not be embarrassed or afraid to report fraud. It's surprising that there are statistics out there that many people actually don't report fraud, but by doing so, that only allows the scam to continue, and it allows other people to be scammed as well. So in order to stop these types of things from happening, we need to be reporting it, and there's no reason to be embarrassed or afraid.
Next, we'll be talking about fringe services. Now, although these aren't necessarily scams, they are legal, but because of the high fees and interest rates, we consider them to be predatory lending or services that are best to avoid. The big one we like to talk about here are payday loans. Payday loans have just silly interest rates. If you were to spread it out over the entire year, the APR for some of these loans is like 300%. I've actually seen ones that are even higher than that. So we want to do our best to avoid those payday loans. Sometimes people can get into a cyclical trap where they are taking out payday loans just to pay the previous payday loan. So we want to avoid those if all possible. There are also check to cash places. This is for people who aren't banked. As we've talked about before, one of the benefits of banking is you don't have to pay to cash your check. If you don't have a bank or credit union, you may need to go to one of these places who can either charge you a fee or a percentage rate of your check, which seems kind of silly since it's your money that you earned. They didn't earn it. So again, just one more reason to be banked.
Another fringe service to look out for are things like used car dealerships or buy here, pay here. They often try to appeal to customers that can't get auto financing traditionally, but I've seen interest rates higher than credit cards. So it's essentially like purchasing a used vehicle on a credit card and paying 28% interest, which is extremely high. Some other types of fringe services that, again, are legal, but they tend to not benefit the consumer are things like rent to own. There's rent to own housing, where you would enter into a lease agreement with the homeowner, and part of the paid rent for a determined amount of time goes towards reducing the sales price. Under rent to own housing, there are two types: lease option, where essentially you have the option to purchase the home at the end of the time frame. But again, if you choose not to, whether it's because you can't get financing, you've decided not to live in that area, you won't get back the money that you put into the rent to own. And then with lease purchase, you may be legally obligated to purchase the home at the end of the term. And again, if you're not able to because you can't get the financing, you've changed your mind, whatever the reason may be, you may face legal consequences for backing out of the agreement. Also, with rent to own, that's pretty common, are things like appliances and furniture. This is where you would enter into a rental contract in order to obtain furniture, appliances, TVs, or just any other household items that may be too expensive to purchase right away if you haven't been saving. And so you're able to make payments instead. But do keep in mind that rent to own items cost much more over the life of the contract than purchasing them outright. Also, if a payment is late or missed, often the full balance is due immediately. In addition to that, once a payment is late or missed and you're considered in default, the item can be repossessed with no refund of what you've already paid. And they typically come with clauses where once you are in default, the interest rate is due in full. So even if it's a 0% interest promotion, if you read the fine print, they often will list that if a default occurs, you will then be responsible to pay the traditional interest rate in full. So again, these types of things, they are out there, they are legal, but once you read the fine print, you see that they are not beneficial to the consumer. And this is why it's so important, to have a savings account, to have future goals, so that instead of needing that item right away and then having to rent it, you have that goal already that you've been saving for and can purchase the item outright without any of these conditions.
Let's take a look at check cashing here. So let's say that we have a $320 weekly paycheck. Now, what would the fees be if we went to a check to cash establishment? Let's say they charged us a $7 fee per check. If we did that throughout the year, every week, that would be $364 a year. That's an entire paycheck just to have access to our own money. Or maybe it's a percentage of every paycheck. Say it's 2% of every paycheck. That would be $332. That's still over a paycheck worth of our money that we're paying to someone just so we have access to our own money. The alternative, maybe you get a checking account, and even if it has a $5 monthly service fee, I haven't seen one of those in a long time, but let's just say it does. A $5 monthly service fee and online bill pay, that would be $60 a year, which, looking over at that chart there on the left, that is significantly less than either of the previous two options.
Another fringe service that's very common and oftentimes are also a service that are at those check cashing companies are things like payday loans. So this is where you can get a short-term loan, but oftentimes the APRs on these loan products are 300% or more. So what happens is, because these loans are meant to be short term, say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, essentially when you would get your next paycheck, the fee might not seem unreasonable at the time. For example, if it's a $50 interest fee on a $400, payday loan, even though that still is pretty significant, when you're in that situation where you need money right away, you might be willing to pay that. But unfortunately, what happens is, because you are essentially guaranteeing your next paycheck to pay back your payday loan, oftentimes when 2 weeks goes by and the payday loan is due, you then use your current paycheck to pay that back. You're now in the same situation that you were before. You're out of cash, you don't have any money until your next paycheck. So then you take out another payday loan to cover the upcoming 2 weeks, and essentially you get into a cyclical situation where you are needing to use your paycheck to pay back the prior payday loan, which then requires you to take out another payday loan to be able to cover your expenses until you get your next paycheck. So when we think about an APR being an annual percentage rate, if you used payday loans throughout the entire year, you would be looking at an APR of 300% or more, which is just outrageous. A credit card, an average credit card might have an APR of 18 to 22%. Even high credit cards might be 26% APR. 26% on a credit card compared to 300% on a payday loan. So, for example, on a $500 loan, the cost per year would be $1,500. So you would be paying $1,500 to borrow $500. Yeah, essentially paying $2,000 back at the end of the year. So again, even though it might not seem all that bad, you know, when you walk in and you look at the fee schedule, keep in mind that oftentimes most people don't just take out one payday loan. So we need to avoid these at all costs. So this is why it's so important to have an emergency savings fund. We've talked about this throughout the series of classes, and this is the main reason why. If you needed to access emergency money, for example, $1,000 for emergency car repair or illness, if you did not have that money available to you and you needed to take out a payday loan with a 300% APR, that would be $3,000 in interest just to have access for $1,000 to cover your emergency. Compare that with a personal loan from a bank. Say you have that financial relationship with your bank or credit union and you're able to take out a personal loan at 12% APR. That's of course a lot better, but you're still paying $120 in interest in order to access that, plus having to take the time to apply for the loan, receive the funds. And again, depending on what kind of emergency this is, you may not have the time to do that. So again, that's why it's so important. If you look here, if you had your own emergency savings fund that you have been contributing to, and again, if it had a $5 monthly service fee, that would be a maximum of $60 per year to have immediate access to your own money for emergencies. Oftentimes, these accounts don't even have a service fee, or if you have a checking and savings account at the same bank, they will usually waive it. So it could essentially be $0. You could have your accounts with being charged no fees whatsoever, and then it would cost you nothing to be able to cover that emergency in the most stress-free way possible. So again, we talk about that importance for this exact reason. So with that being said, what could be the most important account to open and keep funded with a specific amount of money?
Probably my vacation fund, right, Larissa?
No.
Is it your emergency fund?
That's right. So your emergency savings account is definitely the most important account to be open and keep it funded. So that's something that we want to mention as well. You know, we suggest 3 to 6 months of income. And keep in mind that if you do have an emergency and you use some of those funds, we need to build it back up. So that's something to keep in mind too. We want to keep it funded with that specific amount of money. So you set a goal, you've built up your emergency savings account. It has 3, 4, 5, 6 months of income. Once an emergency comes up, because keep in mind, it's supposed to sit there and only be used for emergencies, not when the checking account gets low and you want to go shopping or for that vacation like Tyler mentioned. But when an emergency happens and you need to withdraw the funds, after that happens, the goal is to rebuild the emergency savings account to always have that money available for you.
Yeah, I can't tell you guys how nice it is to have an emergency savings account when something goes wrong. And it's not an if something goes wrong, but it's when something goes wrong.
Right.
When someone in my family needs to go to the hospital, if we have a car repair, if we have something with our house go wrong, it is a completely stress-free situation because we have an emergency savings account that is fully funded with that 3 to 6 months. It definitely took us some time to get there, and it was hard work, but I'm just so glad we did it because it makes all the emergencies that we have non-stressful from a financial point of view. If you have any questions, please, please, please feel free to leave a comment in this video or contact your personal financial coach. We would love to hear from you guys.
Thank you for watching today's video, and congratulations, you have completed the entire class series. We hope you enjoyed watching these videos as much as we've enjoyed bringing them to you. In the description box below, there is one last thing you need to do.
Be sure to take the survey confirming that you are here today to officially complete this class series. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Larissa.
And this is Financial Foundation for Success.